Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine, Taylor-Klaus, and Diane, Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults. Elaine and Diane are certified coaches with personal experience raising children with challenges such as ADHD, anxiety, and more, and extensive experience in guiding parents to raise their complex kids with confidence and calm. On the podcast, Elaine and Diane interview experts, bringing you cutting-edge information about your child's challenges, teach you real-life strategies to create lasting change, and demonstrate how coaching can guide you to parent your complex kids, one conversation at a time. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to another really super conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast. And I am so excited today to introduce you to Dr. Liz Angoff. Did I get that right? I always get names wrong. So Dr. Liz, I know her as Liz. We know Liz because one of our clients introduced me to her because she had done an assessment for her son and was blown away by how helpful it was for her son. Mm-hmm. And she emailed me. She's like, Elaine, you've got to meet this person. And so we met a while ago and we talked and it was like, okay, she is doing something different and unusual. And I'm really excited to share her with you and maybe to co-create something together to see if we can draw on the wisdom of the hive mind of our parenting community to help you create something really amazing in your community. So I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about what got you here. But in short, Liz is an educational psychologist. She does neuropsych assessments for school-age kids. And she created this book called The Brain Building Book, which she uses with these kids to not only do an assessment for them, but then to help them understand their brains after they've gotten a diagnosis. It's brilliant. And so the book is currently used by other practitioners in their work in diagnosing kids. And so, spoiler alert, we were just talking about maybe creating a book for parents, and maybe we might be able to help her do some research on that. But anyway, let's not jump ahead too fast. Liz, thank you for being here. And tell us a little bit about what you do with families with complex kids and how you came to be doing this work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Elaine. I'm so excited to be here. This is really, really fun. So I am, as you said, an educational psychologist, and that is a designation in California. I was a school psychologist for 8 years in a large district here. And then went into private practice and got some specialized training in neuropsych assessment so that I could really go deep with kids. And one of kind of how I got here in trying to figure out how do we talk to kids about their differences and their awesomely neurodivergent brains, yep. Is that when I went into private practice, I got more and more requests to actually talk to kids after the assessment about their learning disability, because parents often would say, all right, I understand my child's dyslexic, I understand my child has ADHD, how do I talk to them about it? And it's really common. There's a lot of kind of little articles out there, but putting this into practice is harder than it looks. And it's really hard for us as trained practitioners who live and breathe this stuff day in, day out. Explaining it to children is a whole other ballgame. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like something that would be so natural. And the first couple of times I sat down with kids to actually explain what we learned, I got glazed over eyes. I got just complete overwhelm. One kid ran crying from my office, which obviously is not ideal. And something was going awry. And I kept looking, talking to colleagues, trying to figure out, what am I doing wrong? Something is not right here. And nobody knew. I mean, people had different ways they did it, but nobody could tell me. And that's how I know kids understand. I think a lot of us, get that overwhelm from kids.
And I don't think it's just kids. When I was diagnosed in my early 40s, it was and I was diagnosed with learning and attention issues. And I still, like you just described, I still couldn't tell you the nuances and the details of it. I can tell you how it manifests, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But all of a sudden, it was like my whole life made sense. my whole life. And I cried a lot as a result of that, because in some ways it was liberating, but in some ways it was really, disappointing. The things that I hadn't done, because all I needed was some help. If I had only known I just needed a supporter or a tutor, like I could have learned how to do that instead of avoiding that so that I didn't fail, which is what I think a lot of us did.
Exactly. I have a lot of parents who are worried when I tell them we're going to talk to your kid about what's going on, because there's this fear that if my child knows that they have a diagnosis, it's going to harm their self-esteem.
Oh, no.
But what I've realized is that like kids have already started creating their narrative.
That's right.
And if we don't help them with the narrative, if we don't tell them what's going on, the narrative that they develop on their own is not only going to be inaccurate, it's not going to be good.
Well, here's how I say it. Ready? And you are welcome to borrow this. If we don't tell them, give them an explanation for what's really going on, what happens is they make up that they're lazy, crazy, or stupid.
Yeah.
And that's what they tell themselves. And I know this because I did this, right? And they're not lazy, crazy, or stupid. They're struggling with something and we can help them. Exactly.
Yeah. And so that was the big motivator for me. I mean, that was the call to action is just, we have to start now talking to kids, helping them to create their narrative. And we need to get good at this as a field. Yeah. It's not optional. It's not an add-on. It's not, wait till they're ready. They're ready now. And the more I've like kind of gotten into this and really talking to kids, they're asking really sophisticated questions and kind of supporting them in how to do that. And the assessment process is the perfect time, to dive into how are you thinking about your learning? How do we help you ask some questions so you can really feel empowered as part of this process? So assessment's not something we do to kids. It's something that we're doing with kids. And ideally for kids. Right? Ideally to really help them. I had the privilege of speaking at the APSARD conference in this year in 2022. And I was talking about parent engagement and it was about, in this realm, I was talking about ADHD and autism, but it doesn't really matter what the issues are. It's about the reason we do parent engagement and parent behavior management is so that the parents can understand the kids well enough to help the kids learn to understand themselves, because they're the ones that have to manage themselves. And this stuff isn't going away. Yeah, exactly. We're dealing with chronic, lifelong brain wiring challenges that these kids can learn to navigate if we give them the power to do that. And that's what I see you doing. Yeah. Oh, thank you. One of, thinking about talking to kids and then all of this, I mean, you mentioned it, but it all kind of just translates up to really helping parents grasp what's going on. So I started using the language that I use to talk to kids to present the neuropsych assessment results to parents and teachers. Yes. So I have the metaphor that's used in the book that you mentioned is a construction metaphor. So, very transparently, the growth mindset language that, we want kids to really, really embrace. And the idea is that your brain is made up of neurons. And since we're on video, I can show you my neurons. Those of you on YouTube, you can see the video. Yep. Yeah. And so, we talk about how your brain is always making these new connections. And at first, when you're learning something, it might be kind of a rocky connection, just, kind of driving those roads for the first time. But as it gets stronger, then the messages are going faster and faster and faster. And it's like you're making highways in your brain. Okay. And so the things that come easily are the things that you've practiced a lot. These are the highways in your brain. The things that are harder, those are the things that are under construction. And the under construction is very specific because a construction project is something in process. It's something that's moving forward. It's something that's aimed at a goal. And it's something that we're going to be able to get through that. It's going to improve how we're able to approach the world or approach learning. It's a very dynamic kind of thing, as opposed to, I'm good at this, I'm bad at this. Mm-hmm. Right. That black and white thinking is not serving any of us. Right. Right. And the metaphor, I mean, kids of all ages can really take it and run with it and like, oh, okay, so the main road isn't working for me. So I had to build a road that went to the side so that I could find a different way there. Or I have a graphic, and the older version of this book, the book just came out today, actually. And
congratulations.
Yay!
Nice.
There's an image in there of, a little flying car that's taking off, because sometimes we find totally different ways of getting there that nobody ever thought of before. This is a very dynamic process. And then when we're thinking about what does the diagnosis actually mean, the diagnosis is the pattern we find when we put those strengths and challenges together. Mm-hmm. So when we're
so stop and say that again, because I think that's really important.
The diagnosis is the pattern we see when we bring those highways and construction zones together.
Okay.
Because our brains are wired in different ways for a reason. There are so many, different kinds of ways of viewing the world that are really important to making our world a better place, to pushing things forward, to questioning the status quo. If we were all built the same, we would never move anywhere. Nothing would happen. And so, the idea of neurodiversity is really important in making change in the world. And so understanding that my brain is built in a way that's making certain things hard. That's why I'm here getting an assessment. But the way that my brain is built is also making other things come really easily. It's also giving me my strengths and talents. And I think so many of the kids that I saw, or parents, it's like, oh, okay, there's my child, has ADHD, but at least they have these other strengths, as if the strengths were kind of a separate thing.
Like a corollary. Like what do you call it? A consolation prize.
Things like that, right?
Right.
But the diagnosis, when we're talking about these neurodevelopmental differences, it's a different wiring in your brain, and it's going to give you those strengths as well as the challenges. And understanding that, my ADHD brain is giving me those creative ideas. It's why I am, so outgoing, or it's why friendships are so important to me, or it's why I have so many ideas. It's just really hard for me to keep up with them all, to get them down on paper.
And what I want to make sure that we're not just talking about ADHD here, because as you were saying that, I was thinking about one of my kids with dyslexia, right? Who has a classically dyslexic brain in some ways and is extraordinary in math and science. And that has a kind of a linear thinking sometimes that can be unbelievable. And yet with the ADD brain can also give her whole brain thinking. So it's got a lot of gifts. You just have to learn to cultivate it.
Exactly. So with my dyslexic kids, we can see those big picture items, that kids are making connections that other kids don't. There's something about the dyslexic brain in being able to find the way that things go together, the way people can get connected, or the way these big ideas are connected, and kind of seeing things in a way that other people don't. But it makes the details, the symbol pieces, hard. And a lot of times with dyslexic kids, I'm talking about that, like, the big picture stuff comes really easily, and you're actually able to have insights that others might not have. But the little detailed things, those are hard. And those are kind of the symbols, remembering instructions in a certain order, those kinds of things. So we can kind of see, okay, the way my brain is built, it's kind of optimized for the big picture, and it's having trouble with the little details, as opposed to, I have this broken part. Right. And then my consolation prize, as you said, that's not why we're built differently.
So I love what you just sort of highlighted. And I'm thinking about my kid with dyslexia, who's kind of different, but that's what I love about what you're describing, is that you're looking for patterns for each individual child, but they're not always going to be across different kids, right? You can have 2-3 kids with ADHD and dyslexia and anxiety, and it's going to manifest differently, right? Mm-hmm. What I want to ask you is let's make this real. What is it that we want parents to take away from this? What do you want parents to know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that a really important takeaway for when I'm working with parents, I want them to be able to walk away with a definition of what's going on that makes sense for their kid. There's so much information that's in the report or that's out there in the internet, and I really want to try and narrow that down for parents to a couple specific things that are kind of the next steps or the starting point. And so one of the things that I do for parents now is that we have the, 20-page neuropsych report, and then I take a single piece of paper and it's split into 4 quadrants. And we have highways, construction zones, what I call helpful words, which might be the diagnostic term or some other terms that could be helpful to kind of know some of the Googleable terms that will be helpful.
Could you give an example?
Yeah. So for instance, a lot of kids with learning differences, executive functioning skills are hard. So knowing that any resource that's talking about executive functioning skills, this is going to apply.
It's going to be relevant.
It's going to be really helpful. Or those terms can be the words can be really helpful for talking to your child. So, a child comes away with a complicated diagnosis, but let's make it simple. So, like your child has a multi-layered, there's multiple layers of emotional challenges going on. We have anxiety and depression, and we're, looking forward and thinking about these other things that could be going on. But for your child's experience right now, they have big feelings that get really overwhelming. So we're going to talk about big feelings.
Love that.
Right? And that's the term. And so those helpful words,
I just wanted the 4th quadrant, but go ahead. Finish.
What does this mean for your kids? So we're going to take the highways and construction zones and put them together. And I start the definition with, for you or for your child, dyslexia means this.
Great.
Right. The 4th quadrant is the tools and construction crew. So these are the recommendations. And I try in there, if you've had an assessment, you know that the recommendations pages are long and can go on forever. There's a lot of stuff there. So it's kind of the first 5, like the top things. This is the first place to start, the most important things. If you do anything, do these things. And
I'm just sitting here thinking about
the people that will help.
Like my kids are in their 20s, and I'd like to go back to their neuropsychs and their psych evaluations and hand them what you just described, because even now, I think it would be extraordinarily helpful for them to understand it this simply, because it really is so complicated, but you can simplify it.
You can. And I feel like for parents, what I tell my parents is we're going to do this feedback session today, but I want you to keep coming back to me until you feel like you really understand. And having that, when I pull out the 4 quadrants, I say, I want you to be able to walk away being able to say, my child has strengths in these areas, my child is building these areas, and this is what that means. So that they feel really confident about those 4 areas. And then the data, the statistics, what each test means, and all of that stuff, it's not that it's not important to understand, but the pieces that are going to help you make your next step forward, make sure you have this. Make sure you can walk away with these 4 things. Okay.
Highways, construction zones, and bottom line, the name of the other 2 quadrants.
Some helpful words to describe what's going on.
Okay.
And then your tools.
Tools. Got it.
So, a couple tools for your next steps.
So I know I told you this was going to go fast, and it did. So let people know how they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So all of this work around talking to kids about their diagnosis and their differences is on brainbuildingbook.com. And there is a parents page. So if you put in brainbuildingbook.com/parents, there's some specific resources that I share with parents. And
just for your information, and she created that because you guys need it, and she's being a phenomenal guest. Aww. So brainbuildingbook.com/parents will give you some resources that I'm confident you'll be building on over time.
Yeah, there's a really cool tools spreadsheet there with a bunch of links to the videos that I love and visuals and things that you can actually just turn around and show your child to start a conversation about things that might be true for them. Some of kind of the top things that I use with kids. So that's a great resource. There's also, and this is the part that you mentioned at the beginning, the tools I've been developing are really for practitioners to use with kids as part of an assessment or therapy. And so if you're working with somebody, please let them know about these and then they can use them with your child. I really want to make this accessible to parents. And so there is a Google form on that parents page that you can fill out to let me know that you would like, a parent version of the brain building book. And then I'll be reaching out to parents to learn more about how we can do this with kids at home, even if you're not working with a practitioner.
So I want to be clear, the parent version of the brain building book doesn't exist yet. She's trying to do some research to create that. We're going to work with her in our community to try to get some parents for you to talk to and connect you to some other professionals who I think can really support you. And I'm really excited about it because I think what you're doing is really needed and long overdue. And there's an opportunity for us as parents not only to understand this better, but to be able to talk to our kids about it with more fluidness and more comfort and more ease. And I really think that's what you're doing. I often say that my job is to take really complicated medical information and translate it into language that parents can understand. And you're like taking that to the next level, which is taking it and translating it to language that their kids can understand. And it's a huge challenge. And I think you've risen to that challenge quite well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That work. So anything else you want to share with listeners before we leave today?
I think that just, being able to do more with parents and the conversations there, the blog that's on that parents page has a lot of the language that I use from real examples of kids that I've worked with. So you can find some of that specific language in those blogs that are just how to explain ADHD to kids, how to explain dyslexia, how to explain anxiety. And so I'm hopeful that will be really helpful to parents in kind of turning around just today to really sit down with your child to talk about their brain, talk about their amazing brain.
Talk about their amazing brain. One of the first things you said at the beginning of this conversation was their awesomely neurodivergent brains.
Yes, absolutely.
That is what we're talking about. Is the invitation to you as parents is to remember that I know they're neurodivergent, and that's part of what makes them so spectacular.
Exactly. And that's my favorite part of feedback sessions with kids now is being able to start it with that excitement of, I am so excited to tell you about your brain because it is amazing.
Awesome. All right, my friend, we're going to wrap up today. As I mentioned to you earlier, we like to end if you've got something with a fun quote or motto. I said this to Liz earlier. She's like, 20 minutes after we're done, she's going to come up with a perfect quote. So we all know that that's the way life goes. But what's coming up for you now? A favorite quote or motto that you want to share?
Yeah, I'll write you with my brilliant one later. I think what came to mind in doing this work that I constantly reminding myself is that, like I have an anxiously wired brain, and I'm constantly reminding myself that anxiety is my superpower. The reason that we're able to do this is that I couldn't stand the fact that kids didn't get the message. I was so worried about these kids, and that created all of this. And I often share pieces of my story and how anxiety has been my superpower with the kids that I work with, because I think it's a great example that we're all working through, different things, and it really can give us our power when we know how to use it to, help us make those steps.
At the end of the day, it's what it's all about. That you can see why I was so excited to have Liz, because coaching is about empowering our kids, and that's really what you're talking about, is empowering our kids to take ownership of themselves and feel great about themselves.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely. Liz, thank you for being here. It was great to have this conversation. I appreciate it so much.
Me too. Thanks.
And when you do get that other quote, send it on, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for what you do for yourself and your kids. At the end of the day, it makes such a difference. Take care, everyone. Have a great week.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.